Hello and welcome back to Baron's Den for another top 10 video. Today we're doing the top 10, well my top 10 agility skills. Now the agility skill tree is not as well loved as others. Certainly not as well loved as the general or the strength, but probably on a par with the mutations and maybe better than the passing. Well, probably definitely better than the passing. It's definitely got some good skills in there. There's also some skills that you're probably never going to want to choose, but you might be able to make use of if you get them on a starting player or on a random. And then a lot of them are edge case skills. They're skills that are good for specific players, but you might not see widespread use of them within the team. So there's only 12 to choose from, so doing a top 10 means we're going to include most of them. So I may as well include the two that haven't made the top 10 as honourable mentions. Right, remember this is my top 10. Yours will be very different, I'm sure. So please, by all means, post your own top 10 in the comments, and we can create a bit of a discussion about it. Right, I think we're ready to move on. Let's go with the honourable mentions. So, the first of the honourable mentions, it's not that honourable because it's never a skill I'm going to want to choose or want to take, and that is safe pair of hands. So what is safe pair of hands? If this player is knocked down or becomes prone, but if they fall over, while carrying the ball, you may place the latter in an unoccupied adjacent square. This skill may still be used if the player is prone. Okay, so basically if you get knocked down by somebody else, instead of the ball scattering, you can choose where it goes. So, is it useful? Well, yeah, it would be useful to put that ball, choose where that ball goes, so you can try and choose the most advantageous place for the ball to land in tackle zones, or on the sideline, or having control over that is useful. The problem comes when, how often is that going to happen? You don't really want your player with the ball to get knocked down too often, and on top of that, that means that's going in place of other really useful skills. I have yet to see anyone, I think, choose this skill. I've played something like 247 games of Blood Bowl 3 since we've had the newest rule set, obviously with Blood Bowl 2. I'm not even sure if it was a skill in Blood Bowl 2, I don't think it was. So in 247 games, I haven't seen a single person choose this skill. Obviously the Renegade Throwers have it, so I've even made use of it myself, but it's not one I'm ever going to choose. So that's why it's bottom of my list. And, it's very rarely going to be chosen and utilised as part of a strategy. But if you have it, you may as well make use of it, and it might actually save a touchdown now and then, because you're able to plonk that ball in between two of your own players, making it hard for the opposition to collect it. Has a very small use, but you're probably never going to see much use out of that one. Okay, and the other honourable mention goes to, well, this one's going to create quite a stir, I think. I'm actually saying that Leap doesn't make my top 10. Now, that is very controversial. So what am I basing that on? So what is Leap? This player can jump over any square during the movement allowance, including a square occupied by a standing player. Moreover, it reduces any agility penalty by 1 for any attempts at jumping to a penalty of -1. So quite a wordy one. So basically, you can jump over a prone player normally, but with Leap you can jump over a standing player. And it's going to be usually a -1 because you're most often going to be going into a tackle zone. But you can't reduce it to less than a -1. So in theory, I suppose with a War Dancer on a 2+, does that mean they can't reduce it to any more than a 3+? Unless there were no penalties, unless there was no tackle zones or anything like that. But the likelihood of there being you needing to leap and there being a tackle zone means that there's often going to be a -1 penalty. Not always, but often. So why have I not included it even in my top 10? Well, I think it's because I just rarely see it get used. Again, in all the games I've played, admittedly it's been against a lot of bashy teams. The Blood Bowl 3 meta is very heavy on bash. But I just don't see Leap being used that often. I don't see it at tabletop tournaments being taken. When I play Wood Elves, I don't see the War Dancers using it that often, because they're just so good at dodging anyway, and they're so fast and they can blitz out with block. I just don't see as much use for Leap. Now, that being said, I did play a Dungeon Bowl tournament where I lost a game against Shadows because they had leaping gutter runners who just rolled really well. So if you do roll well and you utilise leap, it can be a game-winning strategy, you know, because you can just clear a whole line of defence by just leaping over it. But again, I'm just basing on the fact that I very rarely see it used. Whereas a lot of the other skills I'm going to talk about have more specific use for certain player types. Leap seems to be one that you try and make the most of if you randomed it, or you're using it because it's already on the War Dancer. Pogo Stick is a lot better, but obviously that's a trait, not a skill. So yeah, that's why Leap, unfortunately, has not made my top 10. Controversial take, but let's see what's in at number 10. So number 10 is Diving Catch. So what's Diving Catch? Diving Catch, the player can attempt to catch the ball if it lands in his tackle zone as a result of a pass, a throw, or a kickoff. Moreover, he gains a +1 to catch an accurate pass if he is in the target square. Okay, so it's not horrendous because it's adding a +1 to catch, so particularly useful if you've got a catcher that hasn't got the best agility in the world, so like a human catcher, or a noble blitzer maybe, if you're throwing to a noble blitzer. You know, those 3+ agility players are useful. It's useful to give them a +1, but it also, even the 2+1s, because it's a kind of like a cheaper way of almost getting Nerves of Steel, because if your player is being marked and you're a 2+, you've got 2+ edge and you're catching on a 2+, the Diving Catch will take away the modifier of the tackle zone on you. And if you've got multiple tackle zones, again, having Diving Catch to help balance that a little bit more is still quite useful. So why is it at number 10 and not higher? Well, because it's edge case. If you're not going to pass, Diving Catch has very little use. Yes, it still counts for the kickoff or the ball being thrown in, but it's still not going to be happening too often. So it might be one that you take. I don't think I've ever chosen it, but I've had it randomly go to a player and I've made use of it and it's been okay. There was a time when, back in 2016, when I used to like to marry up Hail Mary Pass and Diving Catch. Back when Hail Mary Pass was viable. It's not. It was certainly not the optimum way to play, but it was fun. The idea that with Hail Mary Pass, it was likely to. It was always scattering 3 squares away, but at least if you could get it to scatter back to the tackle zone, you had a chance of catching it then. Definitely not the optimum way to play, but it was fun. But that fun was taken away when they destroyed Hail Mary Pass as a skill. So yeah, that's another way, I suppose. Diving Catch is a little bit less useful. Could be useful on somebody who's going to collect the kickoff though, because it does count for the kickoff as well. So when it's landing in a tackle zone, it'll allow you to catch it. So yeah, Diving Catch, it's okay, but there are, in my opinion, better options. Number 9, we've talked about Diving Catch, so now we're going to Catch itself. So Catch is a straightforward skill. The player can just re-roll any failed catch tests. So Catch, I think, is a little bit more useful than Diving Catch, because a 3+ re-roll, for example, is usually better than a 2+ straight up roll. And obviously, something I didn't talk about with Diving Catch, but another reason Catch can be useful is if you're doing handoffs. So even players like Stunties can benefit from Catch, because if they're going to be the ball's going to be handed off to them and then they're going to be chucked down the line for a throw teammate, it does give you another free re-roll without eating into your team re-rolls. But for the same reasons as Diving Catch, it is more player specific. It's only going to be catchers or players you intend to catch the ball that need it, and a lot of the time Blood Bowl players don't even use the passing game. So if you're not using the passing game, or even the running game of handing it off, and creating a chain, then Catch is going to be of very little to no use to you. So that's why I can't put it any higher. I have chosen Catch. I mean, this is probably the first skill that I have given to players, but it's only specific players, and it's usually a 3rd or 4th skill when I've already got the the primary skills on the player that I want. Right, number 8, Diving Tackle. So Diving Tackle is one that I probably didn't rate as highly as I should have done when I first started playing the game. So Diving Tackle is when an opposition player succeeds in an agility test when trying to leave a square marked by this player. You can use this skill. Your player is placed prone in the square freed by the opponent. The opponent deducts 2 from his agility test. So the reason Diving Tackle is so useful is because it will send a shiver of fear to players even with 2+ agility. So you're thinking of your war dancers and your gutter runners who are normally happily 2+ dodging away from anyone. Well, you stick a player with Diving Tackle and that suddenly becomes a 4+, and that is a lot more worrying then. But then you take your average agility of 3+, that becomes a 5+ then. And yes, you have to place your player prone, but you marry this up with tackle, sidestep, block or wrestle to make them harder to move away from. This player can be an absolute nuisance. Again, similar to catch and diving catch, you're not going to want a lot of it on the pitch, and there's some teams that don't have players really with this ease of access to it, but I can talk firsthand of how annoying Diving Tackle can be for Edge players, because in a tournament once I played Slam with my Skaven, and I'd never played Slam before. That was my first time playing against them, and the Diving Tackle was catching me out time and time again on their Slam blitzers. They are very useful little players, and if you, again, it's not going to be your primary skill, you're not going to give this to a player first, but if they've already got a couple of those other skills, I'm thinking particularly your ball sackers or your player harassers, so players with the skills like wrestle, tackle, strip ball, sidestep, guard even, having that Diving Tackle added to that mix as well means that players are going to find it hard to get away from you. Sorry, not guard, I meant shadowing. And yes, this is where, if you've got a player with good enough movement, Diving Tackle, shadowing, tackle can make them really annoying players. So I really like Diving Tackle, and that's why I've ranked it at number 8. Okay, number 7, it's Jump Up. So I thought I'd rate Jump Up higher than this, but it's always hard when you come to do this list, because you think, actually there are lots of really of skills I really like. But Jump Up, if this player is prone, they can stand up at no cost. Moreover, if they are prone during their activation, they can attempt a jump up and perform a block. To do this, they must succeed an agility test with a +1 modifier. If they fail, they remain prone and their activation ends. This skill may be used if the player is prone or has lost their tackle zone. So it's just really useful because it allows you to not sacrifice 3 movement and block from the ground up. And again, it's one of those skills that you might not think to use straight away, but when you have War Dancers or Norse Berserkers, then you suddenly remember that you've got Jump Up, or your opposition forgets that they've got Jump Up. It can prove really, really useful. The other good thing about Jump Up is it is useful for more than just 1 or 2 players. So I was talking before about diving catch and diving tackle only being useful for real specific players. Jump Up is a little bit like that, but where you can use it on your ball carrier or your scoring threats, so they can, if they've been knocked down, they can get up again straight away. They can also be useful for your safeties or ball sackers, because again, if they've been put down, they can get up straight away and get across. And even your blockers could find it useful to have Jump Up, because they might be able to block from prone. And I've seen treemen with Jump Up, because it means that they don't have to roll to try and stand up. The same with other big guys. Having that Jump Up ability can be really, really useful for both getting up and not losing lots of movement, and also being able to block from down. So I really like Jump Up. Again, wouldn't be a primary skill, but definitely a good secondary skill. Okay, into the top 6 now, and 5 and 6 I think you could put in either order, but I've gone them in this order. So 6, I'm going to go for sprint. So sprint is really useful. This player can attempt to rush 3 times instead of 2. Now, this is where I've been a bit naughty, because I've been a bit of a hypocrite, because I've said dive and catch, dive and tackle are really more useful on specific players. It's very true for sprint as well, but I think it's so useful on a couple of players that you have to rank it higher. And that is because it could allow you to score the fabled one-turn touchdown. Any player, even the fastest player, the gutter runner, can benefit from sprint when it comes to trying to score a one-turn touchdown, because it means that you have to rely less on pushes into the opposition half to begin with. And it also, sprint allows other players of movement 8 to get into scoring territory. So it's a great skill. Works best when you run it in tandem with sure feet, because I'll talk about sure feet in a minute, but that allows you to basically re-roll a rush. So put together, and it can almost virtually guarantee an increase in movement by 3, which is just huge when it comes to moving up and down the pitch. Yes, you're only going to really use it on your scoring threats, but there might be other players as well that you think, actually, if they had an extra square of movement, it would allow me to achieve my goals a lot more. So sprint, really useful. And so I'm going to go straight on to number 5. Which is sure feet. So again, having that reroll means that those 3 extra rushes now come with a free reroll. Obviously only once, but when you think about the odds of rolling 3 dice, how many times you're likely to roll a 1 more than once, it is reduced a lot. And if you're not eating up team rerolls, that can be really useful. And then all of a sudden you're adding 2 or 3 movement to your player, which can make it very hard for opposition to catch up with you if you break through, allowing you to stall if you've moved far enough away that you can bag an extra turn to score your touchdown in order to limit their chance to attack back. But also, in terms of collecting the ball, creating a switch play, it's just they're both really useful. And again, there's not going to be that many players that you give these 2 skills to, but the players that do will end up being your main scoring threats, and I just think those are more useful than the catch skills. Right, into the top 4 now. So, at number 4, I'm going to admit something. This one could be higher, and it could also be lower, but based on the fact that I've yet to utilise it much, I'm finding it hard to place in this list. So I'm basing this off other people's experience of it, and that is defensive. So what is defensive? During the turn of your opponent, any player marked by this player cannot use the guard skill. So in theory, this is a mega skill, because guard is one of, if not the most powerful skill in the game. So a skill that's going to counter that and turn it off is going to be really useful, right? Well, yes, except for the fact that defensive is usually attainable by players who are easily knocked down. And that's what I've experienced in games where I've played against people with defensive. Someone will come and mark my guard player with a defensive player, but instead of worrying too much about it, I've just been able to knock down the defensive player. Works best, I suppose, when you've got your own guard that you can use with your defensive player to help bolster up your perhaps slightly weaker player who's got it. And the reason I'm saying that is because it's an agility skill, so a lot of the weaker players tend to have access to it, not many of the stronger players. But that doesn't mean you can't use it as a secondary skill. So, for example, a big guy can get defensive, but it is going to cost a lot of star player points, and it's going to add team value. So, in my experience, I've yet to find a good way to utilise defensive. And I've also haven't had a team long enough, I don't think, to develop up to the point where I'm shoving defensive on. It's not been a skill I've wanted to use early on, because I've wanted to build up things like block and mighty blow guard, and then some of the agility skills to be a scoring threat. So I've yet to utilise it, but I know that other people use it and use it really, really well. So I've still ranked it highly, and it could be even better if I manage to work it into the way I play a little bit more. So yeah, I've got defensive in at number 4. Right, on to the top 3. So these are the 3 skills that I think are the best 3 agility skills. And in third place we have sidestep. I love sidestep. If this player is pushed back, you, not the opposition manager, choose an adjacent unoccupied square as a destination. So basically, instead of being pushed, you get to move into an adjacent space, which is really useful for a number of reasons. One, you can make sure you are pushed into a place that you're comfortable with. 2, you can use it as a bit of a frenzy trap, or even just a pushback trap of pulling the opposition player into the square you want them to go to. So if you sidestep and then they follow up, and then it's frenzy and they block again, that you can really lead them into the direction you want. It also means that should they try and remove you, and it's a push, you can almost jump into their enemy lines. It means you can hug a ball carrier easily. If you've managed to base a ball carrier and they try and blitz you away, and there's enough spaces, you can then sidestep right next to the ball carrier and keep you in tight. It's just got lots of uses. It can be countered because the grab skill will counter sidestep, and another thing that you can do is you can flood all the adjacent squares, so the sidestep player's got nowhere to move to, and then you can force them in the direction you want. But that requires a lot of resources. It requires a lot of players standing in unoccupied squares to achieve that. And more often than not, I do find sidestep isn't counted very often in that way. That you only usually see that when one player has a big player advantage and they can really swarm around a sidestep player. It also means that you can utilise these players on the line, or certainly one square in from the line where you might worry about a frenzy player. Well, you're not going to worry about that with sidestep. So it's a skill I really, really rate. In terms of which players are going to utilise it, it is mainly for your ball carriers and your ball sackers, because it's somebody that you want to keep. It's either because you want to be moved into a place where you can get away easily, or it's going to be so you can hug an opposition ball carrier. But there are other players that can use it. Blitzers use it very well. My race in my necromantic team obviously come with sidestep, and it's just incredibly useful. I'd say sidestep could be used by any player really. It's just that there are better skills for other players, which means you wouldn't see sidestep being used, and also it might be a secondary skill for them and it's not worth the extra team value you're putting on it. However, no player would be unhappy with sidestep as a cheap random. It's just really, really useful. It's just that there might be other skills that you choose before it. So yeah, for me, sidestep number 3. Number 2, I feel a bit wrong putting it here, but I feel like it should be lower down. And maybe it is now they've nerfed it a bit, but I'm going to go with Sneaky Git. So, Sneaky Git really did change the meta of Blood Bowl, and it really ramped up the fouling meta to a whole other level, to the point where you had to take a Sneaky Git player. You had to foul, and yet then you wanted your fouler to have Sneaky Git. So what it does is this player is not sent off on a natural double during the armor roll test when he commits foul. So that first armor roll that you make, if you score a double, it will not be a sending off. Now it also used to have a secondary benefit of you could move your player after the foul, which was just really powerful then, because it meant Sneaky Git players could come in, foul, and then run behind and duck for cover, which was incredibly annoying to play against. And also when you had that, it was a bit of a relief to know that you'll tend to be more fragile fouler, or the precious fouler that you don't want to lose. You could get them back into an area of safety. So Sneaky Git lost that, so it's probably lost a little bit of its potency. Also with the recent change to guard, meaning that guard can't be used on fouls, will slightly hurt the fouling meta, but I don't really think we'll see much of a change there. So being able to more reliably foul without losing players is going to encourage players to do it more, and that's just so powerful. Anything that removes players from the game is really, really useful and really powerful. And again, Sneaky Git's one of those ones where there are lots of different players you could put that on. Now, you wouldn't want to waste it on a player who's got a specific role, like a ball carrier. Sneaky Git would be a waste on those. And also other, perhaps, players who've got specific jobs. But linemen, for example, if you were to random Sneaky Git on any lineman, you'd be over the moon with that. Particularly as that might have been a secondary random role for a lot of teams. So Sneaky Git is really useful. And of course, at its best when it's partnered with Dirty Player from the general tree, because that's the two fouling skills working together, and that's what you'll see more often than not. But for me, Sneaky Git is more powerful in a way than Dirty Player. You cannot fail the armour roll and get sent off, which again encourages you and it makes it more reliable, and it makes it more appealing to do it. So if you've got a player or two with Sneaky Git, it's really useful. And again, yes, it's more specific. You're not going to have a whole team of Sneaky Gits, but it's so powerful that I couldn't ignore it and have it lower down the list. So yeah, Sneaky Git number 2. Which, of course, means that number 1, and it probably isn't a surprise to many, is Dodge. So what is the Dodge skill? Once per turn and per activation, this player can re-roll a failed Dodge test. Moreover, this player can choose to use this skill when he is the target of a block, and the result is a stumble. First things first, there's going to be some people who say, oh, you know, there's tackle out there, so why have you put Dodge at the top? Tackle is the natural counter to Dodge, as it will stop you using the Dodge to dodge away from tackle zones, but also it means that players blocking you can ignore the exclamation mark when that dice roll comes up and still knock you down. So there is a counter to it, but you only have to play a bit of Blood Bowl to know how useful Dodge is and how prevalently it's used. Because it not only modifies the block dice, but it does allow you to roll, re-roll on a dodge. It's got multiple uses, and any player can make use of it. And I do mean any player. Yes, there are your agile players, the ball carriers, ball sackers. They're more likely to be utilising dodge. However, if I stick dodge, I don't know, on a troll, alright, I'm never going to be dodging that troll away from anyone. But again, it means that anyone trying to block that troll now has lost one of those dice rolls that was going to send that troll to the floor. Again, you could argue, actually, why would you want to waste that much team value on a troll? And that's a fair point. But my point is that any player can benefit from the dodge skill. Some players will benefit from it more. And the other thing I'd say is, because there is still a lot of teams out there that don't have dodge, you're not seeing loads of players with tackle. Particularly if you're playing on Blood Bowl 3. Because there's a lot of Orc and Dwarf teams out there, people aren't prioritising tackle on a lot of players. It's always wise to take 1 or 2. But even then, those players have got to be in the right place and the right time to hit your players. And you see the skill tied up with block so much. Blodge. People call it for short, Blodge. Block and dodge working together, meaning that they need to roll basically a natural 6 to take your player down. If you think about the block dice. So that's why it will always be my number 1 because in the agility tree, because it's the one skill I'm likely to dip into with as a secondary for other players. And yeah, so in my run with Necromantic Horror, I'm going to be putting dodge on my werewolves, so they'll have blodge. Would I put dodge on? I've got dodge on my ghouls anyway, so they'll come with it. And I'd even consider putting dodge on a wraith, even though it's they're not likely to be doing too much dodging, and it is a secondary for them. It's going to make them harder to knock down, and especially a player that's a harassment player. It's going to be so useful to be able to stop the opposition taking my blitzers down. And if they've got a couple of tackle pieces, they're probably saving those players for attacking your ball carriers. So players like your wraith might be in the wrong place for them to use their tackle on. So just an example of just why I think dodge is the best skill in this tree. Now I will reiterate again that the agility tree isn't as strong as the general or the strength, in my opinion. and the skills are a little bit more specific. However, dodge is one of those that would be probably making my top 10 skills overall. Whereas I'm not sure any of the others would. Maybe sneaky git as well. But it would only be those two probably be making my top 10 overall. So that's how much I rate it. Anyway, that is my top 10 agility skills. See what you think. If you'd like to post your own in the comments, I'd be always interested to read what people think. See whether people agree with me, whether people think I'm talking rubbish. That's all fine. Okay. Well, if you've enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll do, I think, the strength skills next for our next top 10. And yeah, I'll see you all on the next video. Thank you very much. Bye for now.